Welcome to the Jack Reacher Review. My name's Jamie Emerson, and this is our review of Nothing to Lose. Nothing to Lose is, and I hate to say it, a crazy mess of a book, and it is kind of a small disaster as a Reacher thriller. It's a bizarre book, a baffling book, and it is, in my opinion, the worst Reacher of the series. So let's get into what went wrong. Well, the background to Nothing to Lose is it was published in 2008, and it's the 12th book in the series, so it's middle-era Reacher. The book starts with Reacher doing something particularly Reachery, which is crossing the USA on a whim from the northeast to the southwest. It's quite a cool way to start a Reacher. It's that kind of fantasy lifestyle. What are you going to do for the next few months? Well, I'm just cutting my way across the country. And he gets to around the Rocky Mountains, and he goes into a town called Despair. And he goes for a coffee in this town called Despair, and he gets terrible treatment in the town. The cops arrive. They basically set up a kangaroo court, and he's turfed out of the town. He's kicked out, and he ends up in a nearby town called Hope. That's right, we've got two towns. One's called Hope, one's called Despair. It's an intriguing setup. It's made semi-realistic in that, well, the settlers, as they were expanding out to the west, they'll have seen the mountains, and it was a trick of the light, so they had hope, and they set up a town called Hope, and then they went a bit further, and it turned out that the mountains were much further away than they anticipated, and they set up a town called Despair. That almost passes the giggle test, and in fact the early stages of the book are very, very promising. I like the setup, I like the two towns, I like how clear it is, and how simple it is. You know where you're at with a town called Hope and a town called Despair. It's a promising opening, and we get lots and lots of different, intriguing story threads. However, that early promise flounders. In fact, it doesn't flounder, it fizzles, it burns, it explodes. This book is a crazy mess. Tonally, it's absolutely all over the place. We see a lot of inconsistent characterization. There aren't many characters in this book. Very few are fleshed out beyond thumbnail descriptions. The characters that are there are wildly inconsistent. Reacher himself is barely recognisable conversation to conversation. There's no kind of coherent core to Reacher in this one. He just seems to be acting in ways to suit whatever is going on within that small scene. Now, the small scenes themselves are often really good. There are about 5 episodes in this book which are really stand out, memorable, really well written, action, really innovative scenes, certainly innovative within the Reacher series. You get an awesome car chase, really good, interesting bar fight. You get a scene that's almost reminiscent of like zombie horror, in which the whole population of one of the towns, Hope or Despair, I'll let you guess which one, the whole population of the town are hunting for Reacher at night. And that is such a cool image, and it's really handled well. It's very well written episodes within the book. However, the plot that Lee Child sets up, it just can't coherently fit these episodes together. And sadly, a lot of the sort of early intrigue and story threads, some of them are forgotten, some of them disappear, some of them are sort of written off. And I feel like if there's ever been a Reacher story that can be like Exhibit A in the court case that's going to prove that Lee Child does indeed write these things just from start to finish without a plan, it's Nothing to Lose. In Nothing to Lose, I think you see Lee Child getting lost. He gets lost in the setup. He set up this story, he set up Hope and Despair, he set up a lot of intrigue and elements, and yet he struggles a lot to keep them in mind, keep on course with them. He struggles to make them pay off in any compelling and coherent way. Despite all the incident, and like I say, this is some of the most memorable stuff in Reaches is in this book. Despite all of that, it actually gets quite plodding. And I think one of the problems is this sense of geography, this hope and despair dichotomy. Reacher is just forever going between one town and another and back and forward and back and forward. In the morning he goes to hope. In the evening he goes to despair. He gets back to hope before dawn. That gets kind of dull. And you start to lose interest. By the start of like the third act of this book, I could have given up. In a way, I'm glad I didn't give up because the ending, it's not to spoil it to say, the ending is absolutely bonkers. It's bizarre to have an ending that's at once underwhelming and at the same time hyper-climactic. I mean, this is the climax to end all climaxes of a Reacher book. It's mental. You couldn't predict. It's totally unpredictable. You can't begin to guess at how this book will end. And even how it ends in the biggest possible way, and it still feels underwhelming. It still feels like a sort of a missed opportunity. I mean, Nothing to Lose really does, to misquote Donald Trump, it fails bigly. It doesn't go gentle into the night. It rages against the dying of the light, but it still dies. It's all over the place, and it's very disappointing. It has so much early promise in the first act, and it fails to live up to that early promise. I think, in hindsight, this should not have been a Reacher book. If I was Lee Child's agent or his publisher, I'd have said, okay, I've read the first draft. We either need to make substantial changes and adjustments to make this into a Reacher book, or let's go even further over the top. Let's go even more surreal. Let's make it full-on Stephen King, Twin Peaks vibe, and let's just go for broke. Let's go crazy with it. Sadly, it wasn't, and I understand why it wasn't. I understand that he's got to reach a series, he's got a book a year. I think he's tied to that. Whether or not he's contractually tied to it, I think he is emotionally tied to a book a year, is Lee Child. So this is a Reacher book, for better or worse. After this, the Reacher series did then pick up quite a bit more. Gone Tomorrow was the 13th book in the series. That starts really well and has, again, some of the slightly bizarre elements that plague Nothing to Lose. In particular, a interesting, shall we say, final fight. But then Lee Child really got into a stride with the Reachers. We had 61 Hours, we had Worth Dying For, we got A Wanted Man, and then we got Never Go Back. And that is a really, really hot streak for Lee Child and Reacher. Nothing to Lose, on the other hand, it's hot, it's on fire, it's burning, but it's not a pretty sight. And if you haven't read it, I would recommend reading it, or possibly picking up the audiobook. Put it on double speed if possible. You'll get through all the good stuff, you'll get the bonkers zany stuff, and you'll get to the end and you'll wonder, well, what was all that about? I mean, one of the issues, as well as all the different plots and subplots and strands of a plot that don't quite come together into a coherent whole, is thematically. There's a lot of themes going into this book. We've got the Iraq War, and it's quite an angry rumination on the Iraq War. In fact, some of the terrain that's covered in Nothing to Lose was later covered much more recently in The Midnight Line. And The Midnight Line is an interesting comparison, because that is it's an older, it's a more mature book, it's a quieter book, it's a more thoughtful and sombre take on some of the themes about army veterans and the wars that they have to fight and then what they face when they come home. In Nothing to Lose, it's an angry version of that, and it makes sense. 2008, mostly probably written in 2007. 2007 was the troop surge in Iraq, and I can see where a writer like Lee Child might have been angry about Iraq and how the American military had been used in that conflict. That's one theme. We also get themes of power and religious power, and how power is distributed often unevenly within communities, and that's encapsulated in Despair, where it's a company town, and a lot of the power and influence and control is linked economically and religiously in that town. That's an interesting theme. The Iraq stuff's interesting. We also get thoughts on the obligations that we have towards our loved ones when our relationships to them change, and when they change, and maybe when those relationships end, how are we meant to feel about those relationships? This is all there, but it's all there competing with dozens of episodes, dozens of vignettes, dozens of scenes, and to be honest, it feels like more of a collection of short story ideas. Nothing to Lose could have been 2 novellas and about 4 short stories. Instead, it was one whole novel. One of the main problems with Nothing to Lose is the relationship that Reacher has with the main love interest and his main ally. In fact, it's the only real character that's properly developed in Nothing to Lose. And at first, it's a really promising character. It's a cop called Vaughn. She is, in some ways, reminiscent of what you might call the archetypical Reacher love interest stroke ally, which is Roscoe from Killing Floor. One thing about Roscoe in Killing Floor is maybe her relationship with Reacher kind of comes out of nowhere. It happens a bit too fast. And one of the things I was struck by doing our podcast about Killing Floor is how nice it would have been to have a bit more development of her and her motivations for hooking up with Reacher. With Vaughn, you get a lot more backstory, and it's well done backstory. You really feel for this character. However, this makes it all the worse when Reacher and Vaughn start up their relationship, and their relationship is just weird. It's almost like Reacher's a sort of therapist, but he's a kind of DIY therapist, and a really strangely ideological therapist at that. Their relationship, their conversations, the dialogue is frankly terrible. Often what Reacher says makes very little sense, and if it does make sense, it's kind of troubling what he seems to believe about them and about their relationship. It's a missed opportunity because Vaughn starts out so well. She looks like she's going to become one of like the best, most well-developed secondary characters in all the Reachers. And she is developed. She's constantly in the book. She's in up to the final scene. She's there. But it's a shame that how she's used is so strange. On a good day, I'd give it 2 stars out of 5. I mean, it's still Reacher, and it has those really cool moments. On a bad day, I might give it 1 star. So forgive me, Lee. Forgive me, Jack. I'm sorry. I've got to be honest. The Jack Reacher review gives Nothing to Lose 2 stars on a good day. 1 star on a bad day. Sorry. I love you. I love you both. Lee, Jack. Really do. No harm meant, really. Honestly. Love your work. Please don't kill me. If you like this review, please tell us about it in the comments below. Please visit our website, www.jackreacherreview.com, where you'll find articles about Jack Reacher, about Lee Child. You'll find a growing collection of kind of reference information about all of the books and much more. You'll also be hopefully really keen to listen to our podcast. That's right, the Jack Reacher Review has a podcast. It's called, conveniently enough, the Jack Reacher Review. And in it, myself and Paul Ramshaw, we dissect Killing Floor. Specifically, the first act of Killing Floor. It's a deep dive. We're going all in, and indeed all out, into Killing Floor. Possibly the best Reacher book, I don't know. It's certainly awesome. Please check out our podcast. It'll be available soon. Please go to our website for more information on that. Thank you very much for listening.